I'm going to talk a little bit today about openers and row cleaners. Over the years, well, I guess let me start off with a little story first. My wife and I were talking about how she made a mistake at work one day and how she was just upset about it, so like that. And I told her, to try and be a supportive husband, she should embrace her mistakes. So she gave me a hug and went to bed. I don't know if there was a hidden innuendo there, but anyway, as we all know, if we make mistakes, it costs us money, right? So over the years, there's been a lot of emphasis on the meters of our planters. Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the other parts of the planter unit, because there's even been a company that started up over just enhancing the meters. But we all know that if we don't make sure that our planter row units are all working properly, we don't have good planting depth. And what caused that, with the crop advancements throughout the years, we've got more and more trash that's in our fields. And so row cleaners from back in the 7,000 days have not only become from an option to a need. So now we went from having fingers on our row cleaners to having shark's tooth. So and then we went from having the pin adjust, where you try and adjust those and get them a ½ inch off the ground, and you adjust each one, and it take you all day to adjust it, and you pinch your fingers about 3 or 4 times, and you have Band-Aids all on there. Then we went to the screw adjust, well, which is great. It was a much better improvement, but we still had to get out and adjust each and every one. We go 50 foot down the row, and we'd sit there and we'd have to get back out and adjust them again, because we still want to run that ½ inch off the ground. Then we came with pneumatic down pressure on our row cleaners. Oh, finally, we have a switch in a little lever in the cab, and we can adjust them all down. But then we get to the point where we can adjust them clear up to 300 PSI and lift our planter out of the ground, and like, Jeff, why is my seed depth not there? Well, because we've got these lifting the whole planter up out of the ground. Then all of a sudden we come out with these planters that are going 10 miles an hour. Some guys even push them 11, 12. And then when you hit a rock with these pneumatic down pressure, it takes that airbag 3 seconds to recover. So in 10 mile an hour, you've covered a lot of ground. You haven't got any trash out of the way, and your seed depth is also not being applied because you got trash in the way. Then we come out with hydraulic down pressure, which has a ½ second recovery with a compression tank there to make sure that that stays in the ground as you go through. And so now it's like, Jeff, well, when should I replace my row cleaner wheels? Well, they call these shark's tooth. When they become gum tooth, there no longer any teeth on them, it's probably pretty much time to replace those. Or if you still running like, in 7200s, you got the finger ones. If you have a finger missing, or you got a bent finger or something like that, probably should replace that wheel. The other thing that you need to look for is if your wheels are wobbling, well, then they're not doing their job. And as we all know, there's that bushing inside that bearing that mates up with it every year. You got to press it out, you got to clean it up, and then put it in the new bearing. So that's just a little quick synopsis of row cleaners, how they've gone from being an option to being a necessity. With that, we're going to move on to, any questions so far? I thought I heard somebody. Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to openers, our disc openers. Does anybody know where we should be at for when they start out? What's the diameter of an opener? Anybody? Well, we got a smart crowd here. Great, I'm glad to hear that. So with 15 inches, you can achieve that 2 to 2.5 inch contact point on your openers. Why is that 2 to 2.5 inch contact point important? I'll tell you why. So that we can achieve that true V opening in your soil. Hence the name true V openers, right? So with that 2 to 2.5 inch contact, we're maintaining a continuous, constant depth in your trench. With that way we can have our seed all emerge at the same time, because we all know corn is not a social plant. So if one emerges before the rest, guess what? It wants to choke out everything around it. So that's why it's important. So what happens, where should we be thinking about changing our openers at? What diameter? 14.5. And why? Because once you get down to 14.25, you can no longer maintain that 2 to 2.5 inch contact because you have a thing in the middle there called a seed tube guard. And when you get into that seed tube guard, you start wearing on that, and it makes your openers hard to turn, so they might just be skidding through the field instead of turning and opening that trench up for you like you want it to. So then all of a sudden you get to wearing on that seed tube guard, then it wears into your seed tube. Then what happens? Your seed just is all over the field. You know, beans, it doesn't matter. We just kick some dirt over beans and they grow. It's no big deal. But corn, it's really imperative, what you guys all know already. So therefore, that's why when they get down to 14 1/4, and you try and maintain that 2 to 2 1/4 inch contact, well, you're rubbing on that seed tube guard. And that gets to be a bad thing. So well, Jeff, I can't really check with tape measure or something like that. You can't really get an accurate reading. Well, lo and behold, somebody invented a gauge that you can measure your seed tube or your openers with. Boy, I'm tripping over my lips. Sorry, boys. But this is great, and I've ordered a bunch of these to come in, but due to supply chain issues, I haven't gotten any yet, and I probably won't see them until the end of April. But just keep this in mind, that this is something that you guys can go out there, take your gauge wheel off, put it on there, and it has a ruler right here to tell you where your opener is at, okay? So, I talk fast, I talk quick. Has anybody got anything that they really want to ask, any questions yet or anything like that? Okay, so moving on. Now, we've established that we need to keep the same depth for our seed trench. Now, what else can affect that? Well, we know that, does anybody know why there's a lip on the gauge wheel tires? Has anybody ever asked that question? Why has it got a lip? That's a really weird tire. Well, that also acts as a scraper. Because we know if we get mud on our openers and there's mud that falls off because it dries, turns into dirt, falls off, gets into our seed trench, well, then all of a sudden we've got contaminated seed trench and your seed is not being planted at the same depth again. So then we have uneven emergence. We don't have our picket fence rows that we really need to have. So the gauge wheel tires are as important as your scrapers, your inside seed tube guard, and everything else. So it's important that the whole row unit works in conjunction to make that accurate meter that we've worked so hard on accurate.